And good morning, all you wonderful people. I can see there are a whole lot of people in the chat already. Just before I start saying hello to people, I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Whadjuk Noongar peoples. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to Aboriginal elders and peoples from other communities who may be taking part in this live stream today. So, who do we have here? Gerald, Michael, Austin, Chip, Henrik. Hey, thanks for beaming in, Henrik. Tassie Bob. Oh, Michael beamed in. What was it Michael said? Button push start. Yes. Keen. And yes, Moo to see on, as Keen says. Illuminator. Andrew. Family Plans is here. Dion. Mad Techie. Hang on, did I say Tassie Bob? Yes, Tassie Bob is here too. And many others. Victor. Hey, Victor. Hey, from Germany. Peter. Yes. Peter made it in. Mike. Okay, so I really didn't think that I was going to be streaming today. Earlier in the week I thought, and anyway, grief is a strange thing. It comes and hopefully will, it's possible that the modem fried in the heat. Now see if the stream comes back. Do we? Yes, looks like the stream has come back. Did I fry the modem in the heat, says Dion. That is entirely possible. So, yes, Dion, I think we are back. Hang on, I've just got to try that. Yes, seems better now. I have a feeling that what it might have been is that the ATEM started recording to disk, and it's in ISO mode, so it was trying to record eight video streams simultaneously. So I've killed that and rebooted it, and now we're back. So I'm not quite sure where I got cut off. See, I will repeat everything just for you. No, going again. Yes. Looks like it is doing something. I don't know. I'm not really in a shape to be fighting with the technology today. Back again. Yeah. And going again. Going to reset the Hey, g'day.
Your connection seems to be right. Does it help? Like, can you
I
wire?
don't know if I could. What would I need? So I'd need Ethernet from there.
Go out the door and come back in, sort of thing, or something.
Yeah. Maybe.
I'll start on it in case.
Yeah, it'll need quite a long cable.
Yeah, we got a long cable.
Oh, okay. And maybe this is back? I don't know. I don't know. Looks like my internet connection is back, but I've got no idea if the stream is going out. So... Is the chat back? It may be. Something that I just discovered is that the ATEM has an internal buffer. So it was actually buffering for a while I was sitting there trying to figure out the problem. So you may see a whole bunch of me sitting there doing not very much. Okay. Let's try. I'm going to redock the chat. I'm going to bring the streaming console back up again. And... Okay. It's current unbroken. Yes. Okay. I am... Say something embarrassing. Okay, Peter. Everything I say is embarrassing. Looks like we are back. Yes. Okay. Stream is going back out. All right. In the meantime, Lachlan is currently running around with a long Ethernet cable connecting in from his connection next door. So he may be back in a moment. We shall see. Could be useful to have a connection from next door sitting here just in case I have to plug in at any point, because his connection didn't drop out. Mine did. So very behind the stream. Okay. Yeah, my I've got no idea what is going on. No idea at all. I keep going further and further backwards from life. Yeah, so one thing that I said just a moment ago was something I didn't realize until now is that this ATEM has an internal cache. So when the stream drops out, it keeps recording internally or keeps buffering internally, and then it sends that video out and tries to catch up. So who knows what's going on. Yeah, I did type that minutes ago. It's because my it's because the anyway. If you expected me to be making any sense today at all, then your expectations were set too high. Yes, Sion, we are here. We are here. Hey, Andrew. Celtic Beast is here too, so a few people have joined the stream since I started saying hello. SP500 Luck is here. Right. Let's just pretend that the last 17 minutes didn't happen, okay? It didn't happen. So, where was I? Peter says, I will boot anyone here who ever expects sense. Yes, thank you. And Peter has the admin privileges to do it too. Okay, so... most chaotic start to a live stream ever, and this is my stream we're talking about, so that's really saying something. All right, where to begin? Now, this stream is going to be a bit of a combination of personal and technical, because what I was really wanting to do, when I was thinking about whether I should stream at all this week, it didn't seem right to do a stream that didn't acknowledge Chris in some way. And I wasn't sure if I could stream at all. And one of the big regrets that I've had now in particular, but over the last couple of years, something I've been really conscious of, is not spending enough time showing projects that I was working with Chris on video, and sharing them with other people that could either just find them interesting or could benefit from them, could do something with them. And I think it was about a year ago, I was talking to Chris about maybe doing some videos about the different projects, highlighting the things that we'd done, and getting other people involved in them. There was a particular project we were working on, which was a software project to make a soundboard for making it easier for him to communicate with people. And we wanted to start getting some people involved in that. And for different reasons, whatever happened, we just never ended up turning the camera on and doing the work. So yeah, we just kept distracting ourselves with new projects and doing whatever it was that came into our heads. Vladimir, hey, good sir, kindest regards from far Ukraine. Welcome, Vladimir. Celtic Beast, who else do we have here? Celtic Beast says 17 minutes, I'll never get back. I owe you 17 minutes, Celtic. Now, I think what I'll do is start with some background, and then we will get into some of the technical aspects of the projects in a little while. First, I've got to explain a little bit about how it was that I came to be doing these things with Chris. Now, many of you will have met Chris already over the years. I mean, I talk about him on these streams all the time, so it's not as if he's an unknown name to you. He's been a very important fixture in my life for many years. And so many of you will have met him at LCA in January 2020 on the Gold Coast. Some of you will have met him at MESH, the Melbourne Eastern Suburbs Hackerspace, which he and Nick created. Some will have met him at Connected Community Hackerspace quite some years ago. I don't think he'd been there for a few years. And just at various things around the place. So, and for those who didn't ever meet him in person, because I've been talking about him quite often, he's kind of been associated with these streams in some way, and also with the place where I am right now with the Super Lab. A lot of this came out of conversations that I had with him, and I talked about that in the early days of setting this place up too. I just realised that my audio level is high because I rebooted the ATEM and I didn't adjust audio. I think that'll be a little bit better now. So, how did it come about? Well, back in the early days of internet vision technologies, when the business was still quite small, when starting businesses, it's pretty common. The usual thing to do is look around and find all your friends that are interested in similar things and drag them in and bring them along for the adventure as well. And I ended up hiring a few of my friends, and one of the friends that I hired was Mark McCauley. I'd known Mark for a few years, and he was studying software development and was just finishing his degree, and I got him to come along and start doing some development work with me, which must have been, I think that must have been around 1998 or so, give or take. It was in that ballpark area. It might have been 97. Yeah, it was in that area, give or take. And the business was growing. I needed more people. And Mark said, hey, you really should meet Nick and Chris. They're a couple of guys that I've been studying with. They're really smart, and maybe they could come along and do some programming. So I think it was around, when would it have been? I think I've been trying to work out the year. I don't really have a very strong, I don't have anchors to link it to, and I don't have access to the personnel records from back then. Peter says, I keep forgetting how young you are. You're right. So it was around, I think it was around 98 or 99 that I was introduced to Nick and Chris. And I ended up hiring them as programmers to work at Internet Vision Technologies. And at the time, so the thing is, I keep forgetting how that there are things that I haven't explained. There is so much backstory and context here that if you have come along to this stream for the first time and you haven't heard me talking about Chris in the past, you may not understand a whole lot of things. So I need to explain a little. Nick and Chris had Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is a genetic disorder which causes, the very short summary is that it causes the brain to be unable to activate muscles. So, and it's a progressive degenerative disorder that affects, that generally starts to exhibit symptoms around the age of 5 to 8, give or take. Starts out with a bit of clumsiness and inability to move physically in the same way as other people, and then over time it causes loss of the ability to walk and use arms and legs and control your body in general. So over the course of the lifetime of a person with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, their ability to physically interact with their environment goes from 100% when they're young to extremely limited, and it becomes more and more limited as it progresses. So at the time that I met Nick and Chris, it would have been around the time of their they would have been about 20 or 21, sometime around the time of their 21st birthday, I think. And so it had progressed to the point where they were using electric wheelchairs to get around, which they had been using for quite some years at that point. And that meant that they couldn't physically access a lot of places because the wheelchairs would just prevent getting in steps and things like that. And they had, so they were using electric wheelchairs with joysticks, and their physical ability to control the chair was good. So they could move their hands and use the joystick. So with the hand in place on the joystick, they could drive it around and move themselves around that way. But they couldn't use a regular computer keyboard. And so having them doing programming had some physical challenges, because it wasn't possible for them to just sit down at a computer, put their hands on a keyboard and start coding. All of the information and the knowledge was in their brains, but they couldn't physically get it out. So what happened was that we hired a carer to essentially be their scribe. So what they could do is sit with a view of the computer screen, and their carer would be on the computer actually doing the coding and putting everything in place. So it was kind of voice-controlled coding. One of the other things that happens with Duchenne muscular dystrophy is, because of muscular degeneration, the ability to breathe unassisted decreases over time, because of course breathing requires muscles in your diaphragm and your intercostal muscles, etc. And so eventually it requires the use of a ventilator. And in the early days of when I knew them, they didn't need ventilators. They could speak very well, so communication was not a problem at all. You could just sit and have a chat to them. They could describe what they wanted done, and that was fine. So they worked for me for a while as programmers doing PHP development, and this was probably, so it would have been around the time of the dot-com crash, so I think it was 2000, 2001 was when things were kind of going pretty bad. And so because of the, so my company was paying the carer. We'd hired the carer to act as their voice control keyboard. And because of the whole dot-com crash issue and all the things that were going on, I couldn't keep them employed. And so they ended up going off and starting their own business doing web development, and a couple of my clients I referred over to them, so they took over managing the websites for a couple of Internet Vision Technologies clients. And over the years I maintained contact with them, but in retrospect, one of the big regrets I have is that I didn't maintain more contact with them from that period onwards. We always had some level of contact. We saw each other from time to time at the hackerspace and different events and things, but I didn't have the level of involvement in their lives that, in retrospect, I wish that I had maintained. So then what happened was, around, when was it? I am really fried today, totally fried. It would have been 2017, I think. 2018? No, it must have been 2017 that Nick posted. Actually, hang on. I'm just going to show you a couple of things. What have I got here? I've got a whole bunch of pictures and stuff. So these are photos from their 21st birthday, which was April 1999, and hang on. These are quite old photos. I think they're probably scans. I don't think they're from a digital camera. So that was Chris, and whoop, hang on, pull up another one, and this was Nick at their 21st birthday. So, in fact, in the background there, I mentioned just before that the mutual friend who introduced us was Mark Macaulay. I think that's Mark in the background there. So yeah, that's Nick, and this was Chris. So you can see here that he's got his hand on the joystick for the wheelchair. So he could drive the wheelchair around, and you can see on his left hand, he doesn't have full mobility of his hand at this point. So he could move a joystick, but he couldn't type on a keyboard. So then I think it was around, as I was saying, I think it was about 2017 that, we can get the date later from the project files, that Nick posted on Facebook saying that he was working on some projects and wanted someone that could do some soldering. And this was at a time in my life when I was in really bad shape. I'd had a nervous breakdown a little while before this, and then after that had to deal with some really traumatic situation in the company. So I've talked about some of the history of Internet Vision Technologies in the past. I'm not going to go into that too much now. The relevance to this and what I want to talk about today with Chris and Nick is that at this point I was mentally really broken. I had gone from being extremely confident and the sort of person who would just jump in and start a company. I would basically just throw myself into whatever I felt like and feel like I could, it's kind of overstating it, but it would kind of feel like I could do anything. I had that classic confidence of youth until some pretty bad things happened, which led to me having that nervous breakdown. And then I kind of lost all my purpose in life. And at the time that Nick posted that he wanted someone to come and help him with some soldering, I was post IVT. We'd sold the company, so I no longer had that business. I was running Freetronics, which was the electronics manufacturing business, and I was doing some stuff with Superhouse, but it was all kind of pointless and undirected. I really didn't know what the hell I was doing anymore or why I was doing anything. And so when Nick posted saying he wanted someone to help him with some soldering, I immediately got in touch with him. So what he was expecting was someone that could help out with projects. And also a very important person I need to mention here is Peter, Nick and Chris's stepfather. Peter is an incredible guy who anyway, now I'm hoping for an ambient outage. So Peter has supported them in an incredible way throughout their lives and is extremely capable when it comes to making just about anything. His expertise is mostly in mechanical fabrication and also in 3D printing and those sorts of physical aspects of things. Not in coding and not so much in electronics, although he can certainly build circuits and that sort of thing. So what they were hoping for was someone who could just do some soldering, put circuits together, help them bring their ideas to life. And so when I saw this, I immediately got in touch with Nick and said, hey, pick me, I'll do it. Partly because, well, a lot of it was because it would give me something to do and it would give me a way to use the skills that I had when I didn't really have anything much to use them for. And so and my idea was that what I could help with was more than just sitting there and soldering some things together under their direction. I could help with design of projects and doing the coding side of things, doing some electronics design. And there was a particular project that they were working on at the time, and this is a project that I've talked about a few times before, which is the wheelchair hand heater project. And let's see what I can find in relation to that. So you can't quite see it, it's out of view of the camera, but behind me I've got a big pile of boxes which are the various projects that we've worked on over the years. And oops, where are we? Hand heater. So I'll show you the real thing in a minute, but just for now, here are some some pictures of hand heater prototypes and things. So the problem, one of the problems with Duchenne muscular dystrophy is because the result, your muscles can't fire, which means that it becomes very difficult to generate body heat and regulate body temperature. So people with Duchenne muscular dystrophy don't have the ability to regulate their own body temperature very well, and in particular become very cold very quickly because it's impossible to shiver or generate heat from muscle activity. And so going out on a cold day in a wheelchair can be really problematic. If your hands get cold, fingers get cold, it can be really hard to use the joystick. So what they wanted to do was build these little hand heaters, which were inspired by hand heaters made by another company that then took them off the market. And this is a photo of one of the first prototypes that we did with the PCB. So Peter had already built at least one, I think maybe a couple of prototypes. Let's I might have a photo here somewhere of one of Peter's prototypes. Maybe I'm just scanning through these thumbnails. I can't see one. So Peter had built one, but it was kind of like a benchtop breadboard sort of project, and it wasn't suitable for bolting onto a wheelchair and using for real. It was really a proof of concept that you could make heat by running power through some resistors and blowing a fan over them, making a little space heater. So what we did was, it's very annoying, it's opening on the wrong screen. So what we did was make up some little resistor arrays. This is a test that you can see with some 7-watt wire wound resistors. There's 24 volts available from the wheelchair. So by running 24 volts through this, we make the resistors heat up, and then by blowing air through it with a fan, we can make it get hot, is the simple summary. So what you can see here, this is after we'd started doing a few of them. You can see there's a laser cut steel case here. Nick designed this case. I think it was Nick. I don't think it was Chris. Yeah, it was Nick who designed this laser cut steel case. So this is stainless steel that's been laser cut and then folded. So it's the base part of the case, and then there's a cover that goes over it that you'll see in a minute. And you can see there's a fan here that blows air. So air is sucked in through the back of the enclosure, through the fan, blows past these resistors which get hot, and then hot air blows out through the grill at the front. And you can see the little edge down there of an ESP32, it's a Vroom 32 module. And on this particular version, by the time we got to this generation of the hardware, we had a CAN bus interface on it. So it's got two CAN bus connectors on there. And you might be asking yourself, why the hell would you have CAN bus on a heater? It seems like a strange thing. But what we ended up doing was, because the wheelchairs have CAN bus on them already, and we wanted to have an integrated system with multiple devices on the wheelchair, with control messages, and something like Ethernet is, we could have used Ethernet, we could have used RS422. There are a few different options we could have gone for, but CAN bus just seemed like a good fit. It's a communications bus intended for vehicles and robots and those sorts of things. And they sorry, my brain went off on a different tangent for a second. Yeah, so we ended up doing quite a few different devices, all with CAN bus on them. So some of the projects that I'll show you in a moment have CAN bus as well, and we could connect them all together and send control signals between them. So for example, another device that we did was a thing called the Chair Breakout Mini, and the intention of that was to be able to use the wheelchair controls to fly a drone or an aircraft or drive a remote control car. And that also has CAN bus on it. So what we could do is use wheelchair controls to send CAN bus messages that could then control anything, including heaters or whatever. It was all it was all like a big integrated plan that we had. So this particular project, let's get into some of the technical stuff here. The point of this, come on, how are you going to launch? Just waiting for Eagle to start. Has anybody been, I've been ignoring the chat. What has everybody been talking about? It was covered in the LCA stream. Okay, Dodgy pointed out that this was covered in the LCA stream. So backing up the story a little bit, let's, I'm going to see what if I can find a couple of things. YouTube. I'm going to find the talks. Sorry, you can't see what's going on right now. What was it called? linux.conf.au. Would have been 2019 LCA, and it was, no. Anyway, I might find it. I'll see if I can find it while I'm or someone else can find it. Someone dropped a link to the video in Discord the other day. Oh, okay, cool. Austin, thank you. Now, which one was that? Is that the... There was the custom input devices one. Yeah, but what I'm talking about is there was a... Yes, so Austin has just dropped the link to the combined talk that Chris and I did at LCA 2020. And there was also a talk that I did at LCA 2019. So, oh, here we go. Copy this. The heater was covered. Yes, it was. So I've just dropped in a link. For anyone who is looking at the chat later, they are in reverse chronological order. Austin's link is to a talk that we did in 2020, and the next link that I just dropped in is to the talk that I did in 2019. So what happened, hang on, I didn't intend for that to play, stop that. So what happened was in, that was in New Zealand, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that one was in New Zealand. So 2019 at LCA, I did a talk called Open Source Superhumans, and it was about the, it included some of the projects that I'd worked on with Nick and Chris, and part of the, so this is getting away from the project for a while, just getting back to more of the human side of things. Part of this was talking about how what I was doing with Nick and Chris, in the early days it was almost entirely Nick. It was his projects that were driving what we were doing, and then later with Chris. What it did was take the projects that I've been working on for a number of years, the home automation projects, which, to be honest, felt kind of pointless. I was doing them just because it was a challenge and I found it technically interesting. I wanted to solve problems and build new things. So I was treating my house as if it was like a big toy and just modifying it, hacking it, changing everything around, rewiring things. But it did feel pointless because a lot of what I was doing was not really providing benefit in terms of what benefit do you get from spending a large amount of time modifying a house, a large amount of time and money, in order to save a tiny amount of effort, like being able to control the lights in the house from your phone, which is, once it's not really home automation, that's making the house a big remote control toy. I enjoy doing these projects, but it did feel kind of pointless. And it was really when I was working with Nick that I suddenly realized the impact that these projects could have on the lives of people who have difficulty interacting with their physical environment in the same way that I do. The idea, for example, of turning on and off lights, or being able to do that by walking up to a light switch on the wall and flicking the switch. For the majority of us, that is just a general activity. It's something that happens. You don't even question that you can do that. But for many people, that's not the case. Being able to control the lights in your house when you can't physically walk up to a light switch and flick the switch, that's a really big deal. And another example, so that's a very mundane thing, but another example is things like electric blinds. And when in doing all of the automation in my own house, I put electric blinds everywhere. And so what I could do is open and close blinds from my phone, or set them on a schedule, or whatever you feel like. And many people would say to me over the years things like, that seems really lazy, why don't you just go and open the blinds, or just do it by hand, everybody else does. And for me, that was correct. Like, that I didn't really have any justification for it, other than it was something that was fun to do. It was a technical challenge, and it was kind of cool to be able to sit there in the lounge with your phone and control everything, lock and unlock the doors and open and close blinds and exhaust fans and lights and everything. But there was no real reason for it. And it was working with Nick that I really became so incredibly aware of the benefits of these sorts of technologies to so many people. And it gave me purpose again. It gave me a reason for doing it, and motivation for continuing to work on things. And more than that, it gave me a different perspective, because the natural human thing is that we see the world from our own perspective, and we project our own abilities and motivations onto other people as well. And so something that I learned to do more is to let go of that, and to just see a little bit more of the different ways that other people interact with the world. And I'm talking about at a physical level here, not just at an emotional or level, or in terms of how you interact with people, but how we physically interact with the world, and how we make things around us do what we want them to do. And so it very much, I think one of the natural human tendencies is that we try to solve problems or suggest solutions to people based on what we think is the right solution. It's very easy to jump in, like to see someone in a certain situation and jump in and say, what you should do is this, or if I was in that situation, I would do this. When you're not in that situation, you don't understand, you don't really understand from that person's point of view what their life is like, what their challenges are, the things they are. And so working with Nick through that first year in particular that I was working with him, it very much made me have more of a mindset of not jumping in and offering solutions to problems, but listening to someone else to really learn from their perspective what is the underlying thing that they are trying to solve. Why is it that they want to do something? And then help to make that happen from their point of view for their benefit and not the way I think it should be done. So on a Thursday afternoon, I mean, I've talked about this incident before as well, this moment in life before as well. On a Thursday afternoon, I was at Nick and Chris's place, and Nick and I had a pretty in-depth discussion about the meaning of life. And yeah, thanks, Michael. Breathe. And what we wanted out of life. And I've told this story before. I'm not going to go into it in detail now, but that weekend, a couple of days later, so it was on 2nd of October 2018, as he was just waking up and about to get out of bed, Nick had an event, once again I won't go into it, and passed away. Well, actually it was that date, because he was on life support for a few days, so that date I think might have been the day his life support was turned off. It was a few days before that it happened. And so obviously that was... Alright, I'm going to skip around. Let's get off that. The upshot of all of that was that the focus went from helping Nick with his projects to working with Chris. Chris had many of his own ideas and things that he wanted to do. He also wanted to finish off some of Nick's unfinished projects. And Nick and Chris, even though they were identical twins and lived together their whole lives, their lives were intertwined, were extremely different people. And they had different interests and goals and very different personalities. And so Chris had some ideas about things he wanted to do, and he really wanted to, well, up until that time, in that period, just while I was working with Nick, Chris spent a lot of his time on his computer interacting with people online, doing a lot of online gaming, but not really engaging much with the physical world and being mobile and getting out and doing things outside of his room. That was really his world to some extent. And I remember Peter said to me once that the difference, because Nick and Chris had identical wheelchairs, and Peter said to me that there was an enormous difference in the battery life between Nick's wheelchair and Chris's wheelchair, because Nick was constantly doing stuff. He'd be driving around the house and he would basically just rarely sit still. He'd be out, going outside, coming back in, doing things, going and talking to people, and his chair would go flat really fast as a result. Chris would get onto his computer and he would be there for hours and hours and not move around much. So Chris's battery would last for ages and Nick's wouldn't. But it was after Nick passed away that Chris became much more engaged with physically doing things and getting out and taking on projects and wanting to create things and work on projects, and not spend so much time just at his computer. So over the next couple of years, we really got into working on a whole lot of different things. So let's do some show and tell, which is kind of the point of what this was about. I'm going to grab, what am I going to grab? I've got some boxes. I've got boxes and boxes of things here. Hey, let's start with the hand heater. I won't spend too much time on this because I've already talked about it a bit. But this is, oops, I broke it. So this is one of the hand heaters. Oh, and you see a little smiley face on there. That's part of a design that Nick used to put on his projects. Whenever he laser cut something, there would often be a smiley face somewhere in it. So you can see the CAN bus connections on there. There are connections for power and external controls, and the air would be sucked in from the sides and the back and blow out the front. And on the bottom there are some mounting holes. So this could go on a bracket that would allow it to be either mounted on a desk. It could sit on a little desk stand, or it could be mounted on the wheelchair frame and blow around into the joystick area to keep your hands warm. Oh, look at this. I've got one of the prototypes here. This is cool. So this is one of the very first proof of concept prototypes that Peter made. You can see it's got the resistors here in they're all in series, and then I think there was a voltage regulator on it, which is probably what the display is for here. And there's an Arduino type, looks like, I don't know, an Arduino Nano or something underneath there, controlling it because it was doing PWM for the heating and for the fan. There would have been a fan on here at some point, but it's been pulled off because there were different fans that we used at different stages. And then this is, was it V1.0? That doesn't look like a V1.0 board. And then this is the internals of it. You can see that there is a carrier PCB on the bottom. There is a vertical PCB which has the resistors attached to it and the fan that blows air through. So there's ESP32 that does all the control, does the CAN bus communication and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So we had this set up so it could be controlled from Chris's mobile phone, which was attached to his wheelchair. You could control the heating from that, and there's a temperature sensor hanging out the front here, so we could set different target temperatures and have the safety cutoff, safety thresholds and things. Anyway, I've got, if I chuck this whole box under here, you'll see that I've got lots and lots of stuff in here. This is the project container, things like mounting brackets for attaching to different frames. Here's a whole lot of wire wound resistors, different parts of the hardware. So this was all Nick's design, and fans, and anyway, lots of stuff. Here's one that's, oh yeah, this one must have been set up. What was this one for? I don't know. I thought maybe this one, oh yeah, this one's been modified. You can see there's a little PCB attached on here. I don't even remember what this was. Why was I modifying that? Oh, that's right, this was a voltage regulator modification. Anyway, into that. That was a pretty interesting project. So it was in a mechanical point of view. The thing that, let's see. The interesting thing is that there are two PCBs here. You can see that there is the horizontal PCB, which is this vertical PCB, which has tabs that pass through the base, and then there are soldered connections. So there are pads exposed on the hang on, I'm getting warnings coming off joints. There is no connection other than through those pads, and yet there is power that is passed up through to this carrier PCB to go to these. I've just got to check. Dropping again. Yeah. Yes, I can see that it is buffering again, which is very, very annoying. Yeah, the NBN sucks. So I am going to just put this stuff away. And HFC NBN sucks. Yes, it does. Oh, well, while that is buffering, I'm going to grab another container and pull out the wheelchair motor controller. Which is this one. Yeah. Okay. This may be the end of the stream. We'll have to see what happens. Third world class. So I can still see some things on the chat. I can still see that chat is active. Just no video. Can anybody hear me? Right, as someone said earlier, I think it was Peter. I should make sure I don't do anything too rude. Yes. Well, I'm seeing something again now. It's saying that I'm live again. I'm back, but probably way behind. Alright, I am just going to talk as if it's working. Okay, so this is another project that we worked on, and this one, no, it's dropping out again. Yeah. So this was one of the projects that Chris and I worked on fairly early on, and this is a wheelchair motor controller. This one I showed at LCA. This was featured in our LCA talk in 2020, I think, on the Gold Coast. Yeah, 144p vision. I really think I should probably bail on this live stream because it's... Oh no, all good at the moment? Okay. It's so frustrating. I don't have the headspace to be fighting the technology at the moment when it keeps turning to crap like this. So anyway, as I was saying, this is a wheelchair motor controller, which is one of the projects we worked on, and it's got a the microcontroller on here is a, what was it, an ATmega 32U4. So it's kind of an Arduino Leonardo to some extent, and sitting on top of it is this motor driver module, which is this motor driver is actually intended for combat robots. There are, I can't remember who made it. Who did make it? It's up that way. RoboClaw, that's right. It's a RoboClaw motor driver. So it's a dual channel. I think it's a dual, or is it triple? I can't remember. Anyway, it's a, yeah, dual. It's a dual H-bridge motor driver for driving large combat robots. And so we use that motor driver on our carrier board to drive the motors for the wheelchair. And the connections on the back here, so we've got main power in, which comes in from the battery on the chair, so 24 volts comes in here, and then these are the two outputs to the left and right motors, and those are controlled by the motor drivers on this module, controlled by the microcontroller on there. And then the way electric wheelchairs work is that they have brake interlocks on the wheels, because if you stop driving the motors and the chair is on a slope, then it can start to roll. There are little solenoid locks that engage with the axles in the motor assembly, and to turn the motor you have to apply power. So by default, if all power fails, what happens is the motor will stop turning, obviously, but also the spring in the locking system will engage the brakes. So if the power fails on a wheelchair, it goes into a locked state to make sure that it can't move and roll unnecessarily. So they can be mechanically disengaged. There are little levers on them. So if a chair ends up in a position, like in a situation where the battery has failed or the control system has failed, and you need to just physically push it, then you can flick the lever, disengage the brakes, and then you can push the chair by hand. But the default behavior is, if the power fails, the chair locks itself in position for safety reasons. Yeah. And so what we had to do is these outputs go to the solenoids for the brakes, and you can see there are N MOSFETs on here. So these are the outputs that are driving the braking system. So what this system does is it takes power in from here through the motor drivers, back out through these to the left and right motors, and out here to the left and right brakes. And so when you need to make the chair move, what you do is, in the logic in the firmware, first it fires the output to the brake solenoid, which makes the brake disengage, and then you can apply power to the motor to make the chair move. And then when you bring the chair to a stop, you wait until it's stopped, and then remove power, and the brakes automatically re-engage. So the firmware in here basically has to do that sequencing. It just has to make sure that any time that it is trying to drive the motor, that the brakes are disengaged. Now you can see a couple of big connectors coming across here, cables coming across here, and the connectors hanging out the side. These are CAN bus connections. So once again, the wheelchair motor controller that we designed has CAN bus on it, and the plan was for this to be mounted down underneath the chair and to receive control signals from the input device, which is mounted further up on the chair via CAN bus. So we could have things like the hand heater and the joystick, like the input devices that allow the control of the chair, and the output device of the motor driver system, all on CAN bus, sending messages to each other. What else is interesting about this? I don't know. Probably not a whole lot. I'm just going to pull up the project files for it and see, where are we? WMC wheelchair motor controller. Let's see if there is anything interesting in the design of this particular device. It's actually reasonably simple. Oop, here we go. And there, so this is the design of the PCB. And as you can see, there's really not that much to it, because a whole lot of the work is done on the motor driver module, which sits on top. You can see here the is that mounting holes? Yeah, so there is a mechanical mounting hole here. You can see the connectors along the bottom edge, and the high current connections through here that are passed through to the motor controller. So this was done, well, the copyright there says 2019, and Nick died in late 2018. So this was one of the early projects that Chris and I worked on. And over on the right here you can see the CAN bus controller and the CAN transceiver. And up there is the ATmega 32U4. If I was doing this now, I would have done this with an ESP32. I'm not even sure why I used an ATmega on this project. Let's see if... yeah, I really just don't even know. It was one of those design decisions that I think maybe it was because we had been using... yeah, it's for historical reasons. It's basically because one of the previous projects was the chair breakout, which was an interposer that connected between the input devices on the chair and the existing input devices on the chair and the existing wheelchair controller, and allowed us to intercept those signals and send them out over CAN bus or to something else, like to use the wheelchair controls to fly a drone. I'll pull that one up in a moment. But the point is that that one was done first, and that one used a 32U4 because we specifically wanted to be able to do human interface device emulation to plug the wheelchair into a computer and have the wheelchair appear to be a joystick or a keyboard, so that you could use the wheelchair controls and the computer would think that you're using a joystick. So the 32U4 was used for that purpose. And then I think this circuit was probably largely lifted from that chair breakout project. I would have started with the chair breakout project and then duplicated all the project files and then just modified it. So changed it around to add the... so up here you can see the pass through to the motor controller, to left chair motor from battery to right chair motor. So the 24 volt connections there from the RoboClaw motor driver, CAN bus interface, and there you can see the brake solenoid control part of the circuit as well. So this is switching 24 volts to the left and right brakes when necessary in order to make the chair move. But the CAN bus interface with the CAN controller, sorry, got to get the terminology right, and the CAN transceiver would have been copied directly from the chair breakout project, along with the all the basic stuff, the MCU power, like power and status, and ICSP, which of course you need with any ATmega based project, because you've got to get the firmware into it somehow. You've got to get the bootloader on at least. Once the bootloader is there, you don't need ICSP. Yeah. Now, where? Another brain fade moment. In fact, let's have a look at the chair breakout mini. Chair ITC, that's another one that I'll get back to. In fact, let's do that now, because I've got it open. This is a little bit of a bizarre one. Looks kind of messy there because we've got all the layers shown. Let's get rid of some of that. Get rid of that. T-place can stay. Even that makes it messy. Anyway, this particular project was something that I did as it's really just a utility module. It's not a complete thing in itself that does anything all that useful, but it's kind of cool for anybody that wants to hack around with wheelchairs. It was one of those things where I wished that this module was available and I couldn't find anything like it, so I ended up just making it myself. And I don't have one fully assembled here. That's strange. So I've got Oh, I've got some bare PCBs for it here. You can see they're quite small, but I don't have a fully assembled one. There'll be one around somewhere, it's just not in this particular box, which is the box where it should be. We might come across it later. So what this does is plug into the wheelchair controller on a Permobil wheelchair, and it pretends to be the joystick. So the way they work is that with Permobil chairs they have this DB9 connector. So it's a 9-pin connector, looks just like an RS232 connector. And it's used for the connection from the joystick on the chair into the controller. And it has a couple of signals that represent the X and Y position of the joystick as a voltage that varies around a central reference voltage. The reference voltage is provided by the chair controller, and then it's up to the joystick to provide back the X and Y values that are centered around that point. So you deviate from that central point, either above or below that voltage, and then the controller knows the joystick has been moved. And I wanted to be able to fake the input to the joystick so that I could drive it remotely. And well, not necessarily drive it remotely, but drive it from our own input device. And the way I wanted to experiment with that was using these I2C digital potentiometers, essentially. So if we have a look at the schematic for that, it's only one sheet. That's the entire schematic. The whole thing is right there. So we've got the chair interface here. This is the 9-pin connector that goes to the wheelchair. And you can see that there is speed out and direction out. These are the voltages that we send to the chair to tell it the position of the joystick, whether it's moved left and right or backwards and forwards. And then the reference voltage here, which comes back from the, which is supplied by the controller. So that's a 12 volt. Yeah, V supply divided by 2. Oh look, I wrote notes to myself because I knew that years later I wouldn't remember. The Omni spec says the reference voltage should be V supply divided by 2. We've noticed that the chair controller can apply a negative bias to this line. Yeah, so they're in investigating how the existing wheelchair controller worked, we discovered a flaw, or not. It's not really a flaw, that's probably the wrong way to characterize it, but it's a particular quirk of the way the Permobil wheelchair controller worked. And so, yes. So what we did was digital potentiometer, DS3502 on I2C, and that provides the voltage that goes to the chair for the speed, and another one here provides the voltage for the direction. So the result of all of this is that the point of this module is you plug it into the wheelchair controller and it gives you an I2C interface to be able to drive the chair. And that then opens up a whole lot of possibilities. And if you use it means you can use a microcontroller and just drive this. Now, when I was, my chair's not working properly. Is this the one? Yes, this is it. Somewhere around I've got fully assembled versions of these, but they're not in these boxes, which really, really sucks. Wheelchair control breakout, zero stick. Oh, maybe it's in the zero stick box, because I would have been using them in relation to that. Yes, here we go. I have found them after all. Because the reason for doing this was to be able to use our own input devices, or do something like drive the wheelchair from a Raspberry Pi, because then you can do all sorts of stuff like We could add collision avoidance and self-driving and those sorts of things. So what have I got in here to show? All right. What do I want? That. Yeah, so this is the module that I was just talking about. The connector on the Permobil controller is this DB9 connector. Or I know it's not technically called a DB9 connector. People will tell me off for that, but that's generally how it's known. And as you can see, the module is very small. So what you can do is unplug the original joystick, simply plug this into the Permobil controller, and then there is a header on here for power and I2C, and then whatever device you want that can speak I2C can control the chair and send signals that will fake out the joystick position so you can drive it around. So yeah, this module gives a Permobil wheelchair an I2C interface. That's the whole point of that. Now, the reason for doing that was as the first stage towards building this and this. This is a more complete version of it. So I'm just going to unplug this. Which way around is it? Okay. So this is the front end of this that you can see on the right. This is where it plugs into the wheelchair. It's essentially the same circuit. It's got a couple of the little I2C potentiometers on here. It's got the output that drives the chair. So once we had done some experiments with this module and we knew that we could fake the joystick input to the chair, it was expanded into this, which has got an ESP32 on it. And what else do we have? So we've got an I2C interface on there. We've got USB-C coming out the back. And this allows us to put our own input devices into it. And from there, the ESP32 can drive the chair around by sending the correct signals using these digital potentiometers. Yes, so then the point of that was the Zero Stick project. And this are a whole lot of different prototypes, and it's one of those things that it actually worked a few times, but it was frustrating trying to make it work consistently and reliably. So with this, what we could do, the reason there's an extra header on here on the this Permobil wheelchair controller module. So this particular project called, what was it? What did we call it? Yeah, Permobil wheelchair controller. And it's got an I2C header on here, which can interface to a module like this, which is another one that we designed. This is a dual channel load cell interface with an I2C interface on it. And that can plug into there. And then we can plug in, oh, here's another one actually wired up with a pair of load cells. So this is this is one of the prototypes for the Zero Stick, and I think this fits into here. Yeah, so that's the base that it goes onto. So it's a joystick that doesn't move. It's physically locked in place, and unlike a normal joystick, so with a regular joystick, the input is the degree of deflection. The point with this joystick is that the joystick doesn't move. Oh no, it looks like I am getting dropouts again. I don't know if anybody can hear me, but I will kind of keep going. Yeah, it's testing my patience. One of the issues with using wheelchair controls or any kind of controls when Michael said we're all dropouts. Yeah, we are all dropouts. I am a total dropout. Is not just lack of strength, but lack of range of motion. It's not enough to just make a joystick that is really, really light, because people with muscular dystrophy can't, even if there is no load. So if Chris's hand is on the braced on the edge of his wheelchair, for example, and there is nothing pushing against it, so it's only the weight of his fingers, I think he had about 10 millimeters range of motion in total, which is very small. So even if we made a joystick that required almost no effort to move, Bill Mini joystick, I think it's called, is like that. It's a Hall effect joystick with very, very low activation pressure. He couldn't move his fingers very far. So what we were doing was puzzling over the problem of how to detect intent, or how to detect a control input without requiring either a lot of strength, like to work against the spring in a joystick, or a lot of range of motion. So it needed to be able to detect very small amounts of pressure with minimal actual movement. And that is quite a trick. So this is what we ended up going for. A couple of load cells. We did quite a few different arrangements of this. You can see that this is 2 load cells that have been cut and machined a bit so that they would interlock. Pete did this, and then it's cross screwed. So what we've got is 2 load cells in line, and they are rotated 90 degrees relative to each other. So one of these load cells, so if you grab the top of this joystick, one of the load cells will detect front back pressure, and the other one will detect left right pressure. So what you can do is have your fingers resting on the top of the joystick, and you don't need to even move the joystick. All you do is push against it a little in any direction, and the 2 outputs from those load cells, the strain gauges attached to it, will allow you to detect the pressure that is being applied to it. So then, where is it? I'm just looking, where is the zero stick box? Zero stick, there. Yeah, there are a few different things that we tried. This is another one. This is another piece that Peter machined. So instead of, what you can see on this one is 2 load cells that we just bought on AliExpress or somewhere. So they were all pre-assembled, and then they were cut and fitted together to turn it into one. But this was our attempt at making a 2-axis load cell from scratch. So this is a piece of aluminium that Peter machined, and then we glued the strain gauges onto it. You can see a pair of strain gauges there. This didn't get as far as putting them on this axis. We only got one of the axes connected up, but you can see that the intention here is that it is a single load cell with one axis working in that direction and one axis working in that direction. And that would allow us to make a much more compact joystick and mount that in a space where the original Permobil joystick would go, and be able to detect the pressure from Chris's fingers. Oh yes, here's another one. I think this is one of the ones that actually worked quite well. So this was an early prototype. Once again, it is existing load cells just attached at right angles to each other. So in fact, I think this is just super glued together. It's really very crude, but it worked quite well. So it's got the mount on here where it can be attached to a bracket to go onto the wheelchair, and then by adding Wheatstone bridge amplifiers to this, we can measure the strain that is on those two axes. And at one point, oh, here's another one. At one point, we had it running quite well. That one had a. Hang on, I'm going to get that off. It's got a. This is TPU, and that's TPU as well. So, this is a 3D printed knob that goes onto the end of the joystick, but it's printed in TPU, which is. Oops, I just sprung it away. Which is soft. So, this is it's squishy, and that goes onto there. So we experimented with a couple of different shapes as well. That one's just like a simple cylinder. This one is more of a spherical top on the joystick, so Chris's fingers could sit on that. And I'll pull that cap off, slide this off, and you can see here that there is a little machined bracket at the bottom, another one of Peter's creations, and then we've got two load cells at right angles, and one of them has been machined to add a U channel into it, a U slot. So this is just an optimization of this design. This was my early attempt, just gluing them together at right angles, but it caused a bit of an offset. And then this is the same thing, but the axes are all aligned. So I think this one may have been one that worked quite well. And we had the chair driving around with that joystick connected to it, going into the Permobil wheelchair controller interface, plugged into the existing wheelchair controller, so that we could use that joystick to send the necessary voltages to drive the wheelchair. And the original wheelchair controller just thought that it was Elise is here. Welcome, Elise. Elise is another one of the carers. So, what do I have? Oh, I've got a whole bag full of stuff here related to the strain gauges as well. Somewhere, in fact, I have a feeling that I might have a video of this is where my brain fades. I can't talk and do this at the same time. I'm looking for the wheelchair. Yes, I think this is it. I'm just going to switch to here. This was me and Chris. So you can see Chris up in the back right there on his computer. Looks like he's playing Eve while I was messing around with the wheelchair. So this wheelchair that I was sitting in is Nick's old wheelchair. And this was driving it around. You can see that I was using the joystick sitting on top of the chair here. And I'm going to bring it back in a minute. I can pause it so you can see. Okay, so there are a few interesting things here. Can we zoom? Not really. That little light colored ball down there that you can see just to the right of my leg, that is the top of the original joystick. That's the Permobil mini joystick, which is the very lightweight Hall effect joystick. And you can see a silver box down here. That's the wheelchair hand heater blowing up into the joystick area. So in normal use, you wouldn't have your hand like this. I was just doing this because I had the prototype sitting up on the top. And normally your arm would be horizontal along here, with your hand coming down into this position here around the joystick. But this chair was set up. The thing is that chairs are customized to suit the person that uses it. All of the cushions are adjusted, the position of everything is adjusted when the chair's first set up. And I'm just a little bit bigger than Nick and Chris, so I didn't really fit in the chair very well. I was jammed in like being in a child seat. So I don't think I could even get my arm into that position. And so I've got the joystick sitting up here. You can see there's a little green LED just there, and there's another one just down here, a reddish looking one. That was the wheelchair controller. So the grey lead that comes out of the bottom of the Permobil controller here and loops around, that was going into this device here. And this is what was sending the signals to control the chair and make it move. But the input from up here was from, I think it might have been using my left hand there to drive it. So the input from up there was from the 0 stick. And so if I come back to here, you can see that it was working pretty well. This is a fairly confined space. And it's fairly smooth. Like, it's quite surprisingly smooth. The chair jerking around like that is more my lack of skill with driving it, I think, than problems with the control system. So the control system was working pretty well, and we got it to this stage where it was functional, and at some point, it was just after this, things seemed to go kind of badly with this project. Chris used to swear about it a lot. He was very frustrated because we got it to this point where I could drive the chair, and we did some experiments with Chris trying to drive the chair, and we could never really get it working for him. There were, it's like one of those classic situations where you make some technology and do the demo, and the demo works fine, and then you try it for real and it doesn't work. Yeah, that's it's one of those things. Oh, look at this. This was one of my very early concepts. This is what I was working on at the time of LCA 2020. And my original idea when I was thinking about how to make a zero deflection joystick was to use 4 load cells. And this is a demonstration of how little I understood at the time. So what I've got here is a 3D printed base, and then 4 load cells that go into it. And my general concept was that it would work like this. So you can see that I've got a, oh great, more dropouts. You can see that I've got another little 3D printed block in the middle. It looks like this is solid in the middle, but it's not. That cap is sitting on a spring, so this whole thing can move. The top of this joystick can be pushed in different directions. More dropouts. Yeah, it can be pushed in different directions, and when you push it in any direction, that particular load cell will see a positive signal. And this did actually work. So what I had was 4 load cell interfaces, so 4 load cell amplifiers connected to this that were being read by an Arduino. And what would happen, for example, say this was the left and right axis, the x-axis. If you pushed it to the right, this load cell would start seeing a positive value, and this load cell would have a 0 value because there's no pressure against it. And then if you push it to the left, that one would get a positive value, this one would get no value. And this structure was done in this way because I wanted to be able to Like, it needs to not be physically connected to the top of this load cell, because it also needs to be able to move in this direction to activate on the other axis. So this is the overcomplicated first pass. This is one of those things where I was just puzzling over the problem of how do we detect force in 2 axes, so 4 directions. And my my first thought process was, hey, let's use 4 load cells and we'll measure each of those directions independently. And of course you can do some mixing. So if you're pushing diagonally, then you'll get positive values on 2 of the cells. And by looking at the magnitude of those 2 vectors, you can figure out whooshed. So it's just some basic trigonometry to work that out. But as I said, that was overly complicated. And the classic thing, you know, when your brain is churning over on a problem, standing in the shower or whatever, just thinking, how can I make that simpler? Why do I need to, if I can get a negative value out of a load cell, why do I need 2 load cells on each axis? And then, you know, inspiration suddenly hit. And that is when a single piece of metal with strain gauges to give us load cells in 2 dimensions. So we get positive values in one direction and negative values in the other. Yeah, here we go. Look at this. This one is taped together with medical gauze because there was always that sort of stuff around at Chris's place. But these were, and super glued them at right angles to each other and just put some gauze around it to hold it. Oh, not gauze, it's micropore. Yeah, micropore medical tape to hold it while the super glue was drying. So the end result was that this arrangement with 2 load cells at right angles to each other achieves the same end result as this overly complicated thing, which is how I started out working on this particular problem. So this worked, but it was too complicated. And also the tolerance has become an issue because you're dealing with coupling between this central part and the load cells. And if the mounting of the load cells is not accurate, you either get positive pressure against the cells all the time, which you then have to compensate for, zero it out in software, or there is a little gap, which means that there is latency, or not really so much latency, it's more hysteresis, or hysteresis, however it's pronounced, between moving this and it engaging with the load cell. So you end up with a little dead spot in the middle. The nice thing about this approach, with the 2 load cells physically attached to each other, bonded together at 90 degrees, and with the top of the load cell itself being the contact point. I don't know if you can hear that. There are big booming noises outside at the moment. It's because there is a truck directly outside the lab unloading logs for the sawmill over the road. They'll be dropping very big logs off with a forklift at the moment. And Lachlan has said to me what we should do is put in some kind of a seismometer project. We should put some ground shock detection system in place so that we can tell when they're dropping logs off, or just log the fact that they're dropping logs. Yeah. Scott says just don't try to use micropore as an insulator. Yeah. No, micropore is not electrical tape. Where are we? Where are we? Right. So we got to the, with that project, we got to the point, yeah, Michael says, log detect ESP32. Yeah, that is a project that I would very much like to spend some more time on. I think it has enormous potential, and it has benefits that are very hard to achieve with other types of joystick. So the major benefit, well, two major benefits. First one is the zero deflection aspect of it, so that the operator of the joystick doesn't need to physically move their fingers in order for the wheelchair to detect the fact that they're pushing against it. They just have to push against it and it doesn't move. So that's one thing. But this is the other thing, and that is variable sensitivity that can be set in software. And that reminds me, there is another project that used load cells. I'm going to pull this one up. This one is kind of cool. Another one that we messed around with and we got it sort of working. Super button. Yes, there it is. I've got a box of it over here. Thing is, I haven't even talked about the wheelchair control breakout, which is probably one of the most generally useful things that we worked on. This is a project that used a load cell in place of a nurse call button, and this is the controller from it. Whoops, it goes that way. Unfortunately, oh, hang on, there is one that is semi-complete, and there is part of the button for it, and here is a bit more of another part of it. So one of the difficulties that had in particular over the last couple of years was lack of strength for pushing a nurse call button to get attention during the night, or whenever, so either needing assistance at night or just to get attention during the day. And and so what we did was have a look at ways to make a button that could be tuned based on the strength of the person. So inside here, I might take this apart, but basically what's inside here is a load cell. It's this. There is a load cell, and this is a vibration motor. So this is for haptic feedback, and it's mounted inside this 3D printed enclosure. So these things together are what go inside here. And then that plugs into this. I wonder if this works. I might be able to turn this on and show you. That would be cool. Actually have something working for a change. I've just got to drag across some USB, and I'll take that cover off, plug this in. Oh, it's micro USB. Why didn't I use USB-C on there? This is probably an old one. I think I might have switched to USB-C on the newer version of this project. This may be an old one. But the idea with this was just that it would be powered off USB. Button not connected, it's saying. Okay, so it's failed to detect this. There is some fault with this. I haven't looked at this for probably a year and a half. But the idea with this is that it's a nurse call system that uses the button with the strain gauge, and it's got a menuing system, which is not going to work because it's not detecting the button. I wonder why that is. Let's It gave a value temporarily. Is this actually working? No, it's not. Yeah, you can see there's a resistor that's been patched onto the PCB here, so this is yeah, this is definitely not a final version. There was a newer version than this. So the summary is the button itself goes into the person's hand, mounted in whatever way, you know, with a Velcro strap or something. So it might be in a position where the person's thumb is across the sensitive part of the load cell. And the idea is that the controller here detects how much force is being applied, and there is a threshold that's set. So what you can do is tune the activation force of the nurse call button based on the strength of the individual and how it's set up in their hand. This is a rotary encoder, and it's got a button input on it as well. So there's a little menuing system where you can set this up, press the button to go into threshold set mode, and turn the knob to set the threshold, and then press it again to save it. And then whenever the person presses the button harder than that threshold, and it gives you real-time feedback on the display, it shows the pressure that's currently being applied. When it exceeds that threshold, it fires a read relay, which is under here, and there's a 3.5mm socket on here, which is the output, and that's what goes to the actual nurse call system. So that'll go to a buzzer or pager or whatever is necessary. It's just a switched output. Now this is another, what version is this? So this one, where's the version number? I can't find it. I'm always going off at people for not putting version numbers on their projects. Maybe I didn't do one on that one. So normally open, normally close. Yeah, I think this is the newer version of it. Let's try. Oh yeah, and I switched to USB-C. So that is definitely the newer version. So the idea is that you can adjust this to make it easy to be pressed by whoever is using it. And with a normal nurse call system, which could be like a fairly large mechanical button, or there are lots of different things. There are pressure-based systems that use balloons and then a thing like a barometric pressure sensor to detect when the balloon is being squeezed. So yeah, there are a variety of different mechanical solutions to it, but a lot of them rely on mechanical tuning in order to set the activation threshold. If, for example, you have a mechanical switch and you need to squeeze the switch to activate it, typically there will be a spring inside the switch which sets the auto return on the mechanism, and you need to be able to overcome the strength of that spring to activate the switch. And changing that obviously means mechanical changes. You have to change the spring inside it. And with traditional nurse call systems, it can be really, really hard to adjust that. So the whole point with this is that it would suit different levels of strength, ranging from almost none to someone that has like a regular sort of level of strength, just by changing the threshold on the controller. So yeah, Mad Techie says read relay, yuck. Yes. Version number is hiding next to the test points, says Scott. Thanks. Yeah, Mad Techie, so you don't like the read relay. I understand that. One of the reasons for doing that is I needed to be able to control either, well, this is not a function of the read relay, but one thing we need to be able to control is either normally opened or normally closed outputs. And we also need total isolation from the outputs, because this device could be plugged into a nurse call system in a hospital, or it could be like a DIY nurse call system. So we really don't know what is going to be on the other side of it, and you can't rely on the polarity. So a neater way to do this would be to use something like a MOSFET to drive that output. But if you're going to do that, you need to know what the polarity is on the other side or the other device. and you can end up with a common ground situation. I wanted total isolation. An opto isolator would be another of that, but once again, you need to know something. In order to use an opto isolator, you need to know the polarity of the device that you are connecting to. And a simple mechanical output in this case, like a read relay, is just like it's one of those things where it's going to work no matter what. So I went for the low-tech approach, the old electromechanical switch. Let's try this. It's probably not going to work any better, but it'll be cool if it does. Plug it in and power it up. Doesn't have firmware. This out. It is actually working with the haptic feedback and everything. So what you can see here is on the left is the pressure that is currently being applied to it. It's saying 1 because of the position this happened to be in when it started up. So on it's detecting that weight of the sensor itself is 300 grams max scale. So what will turn on, and that it's been, you can't tell feedback motor. You might be able to just see it spinning. Wait. And the alarm off. You don't actually know if it's done. So what we put this vibration motor in the button assembly, so the button vibrates. Triggered. So I've got the trigger. Push it past 25, it comes on. It's not one, but what I can't remember. There might to prevent it being changed. It's like it's not detecting the menu. So the idea, and you can change that. Press it again and it saves it. Set up, and then you can squeeze it, and you can applying. It's going to be active. Yes, more buffer. The threshold. Okay. Coming back. It's here. Is this version 2. So and the controller, and it reads and allows you to redirect the interface. Yeah, so what you can do is so that it won't move. and have those controls sent. In this case, we've project for emulating a US. This allowed us to do and make the yeah. That's just all right. I wanted to come, but I can say goodbye. And hope stabilize. Yes, welcome to thanks to our back. It's yeah. What I wanted to talk about, or how I wanted to present all of this. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this or not. So I'm going to say it. I'm going to say thank you for coming along, and I think what would be a good idea is to talk about some of these projects in future, just like one project at a time, and it will buff out, yeah, and cover some of the more interesting aspects of it. So I'm going to hit the goodbye.